we have something called Sciton IQ, which is where we can track it's really to track the health of a system, but it also tells us how many treatments are people doing. And we always believed that once physicians' treatment volume picked back up, well, the orders are going to pick back up and people will start buying more capital. And that recovered. That was definitely a V-shape. We were surprised at how fast it recovered. As a matter of fact, for 5 consecutive weeks now, we have been above 2019.
Hello, I'm Dr. Grant Stevens. Welcome to the Technology of Beauty, where we talk to the movers and shakers in aesthetic surgery, aesthetic medicine, and all things beauty. Today, we're so fortunate to have Burton, the CEO of Sciton. Aaron is a friend and a colleague, a fellow professional, and today we're going to get to know him and all about his company, Sciton. Welcome, Aaron.
It's good to be here. Thanks, Grant.
It's great to have you, buddy. So tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, Sciton's based in California, based in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm usually traveling out there, but I live in Texas. And this is only the second time in 6 months I've been out of my house. So
well, welcome.
It's good to be out a little bit. I appreciate the invite.
We feel honored to have you. Did you fly in today? Or?
Flew in yesterday. On a surprisingly packed plane. I was surprised how many people were on the flight, but there's a lot of people traveling. So.
That is surprising. Well, I'm not sure if that's good or bad news.
I don't know if that's good or bad either.
Where'd you come in from? Let our guests watch.
Dallas to LAX, and both airports were surprisingly really busy.
Yeah,
so
that's what I've heard.
Somewhat surprised. But.
So tell us about Sciton.
Yeah, we we are based, like I said, we're out of Palo Alto in the heart of Silicon Valley. We've been in business 23 years. Our founders, who you know well, are Jim Hobart and Dan Negus, who really are founders of the industry, if you really think about it. Mm-hmm. We build and design everything in Palo Alto. We're worldwide, but a big chunk of our people are in Palo Alto, and we build and design energy devices, laser and light-based systems, and we've been doing it for 23 years. It's been pretty cool.
Well, a couple questions about that. You mentioned that's where lasers started, or that's where they've been a part of the industry. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, and I don't know. You know this story, but many
I
people,
do, but our listeners and our watchers don't know.
It's a good topic because Jim Hobart, our former previous CEO, now he's the chair of the board. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like to brag and talk about this stuff, but he's really in '66 when he created and founded Coherent, and he was Coherent's founding CEO. He was there for 30 years, and Coherent is still a major player in the laser world today. They don't do the medical side or the medicine side, but in the industrial world, Coherent's very big.
Yes.
And he started all that in '66, and really, if you think about our industry and the lasers in the industry, it really Luminous came from Coherent. If you look at you still in some trade shows, there's pictures of Hobart out there, and while he doesn't like to brag about it, now that I'm the CEO, I do brag about it. But, I think he deserves a lot of the credit for, creating this industry, or at least the laser portion of our industry.
No question about it. And I want our listeners and viewers to understand that better, because there's been a sequence of companies that Hobart is responsible for and leading all the way to Sciton. And You're heading up the Sciton efforts now as the CEO. But I'd like you to explain a little bit more about Sciton. It's oftentimes called the Bentley of Lasers. I want you to elaborate on where it's built, how it's built, and what separates the Sciton philosophy and the whole Sciton laser business from the rest of the pack.
Yeah. We're commonly called that. I mean, you call us that a lot, but everybody's, there's some term or something like that people call us. And we think it's pretty flattering. I mean, it's, we build everything in Palo Alto. We design everything, build everything in Palo Alto, and there's a higher cost to that. So the stuff that we sell, we know is not cheap. We do not put a cheap device out there. And the device, our mJOULE X platform, can do so many things that it appears to be really expensive. And it can be, but it does a lot. It's not just doing laser resurfacing, or it's not just doing our BBL, or our IPL. It can do so many different things. You could have 15 different applications or 15 different, treatments you're doing on one device. So it does, when you look at it that way, it does look like it's expensive. And that's where we get this term, we're the Bentley of Lasers. And also, we're known that they last a long time. One of the benefits of building in Palo Alto is all of our engineers. Both of our founders, Jim and Dan, are physicists. They're scientists, so they're the ones sitting back in the lab building systems and looking at systems. And to this day, they're still, on the day-to-day side, they're not as involved. But when it comes to building lasers, they're still, chiming in and giving input to our entire engineering team that's bigger than ever. But there's one big benefit there is if there's ever a problem or you run into something, you're walking to the manufacturing building that is a 2-minute walk. It's all part of our campus. And, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we build everything in the U.S. and it's more expensive and it's not as easy to build it in a sense that from a cost perspective, you can't build a cheap device and we don't build a cheap device, but we're really proud of it.
Yeah, so. You sure don't. And when I say the Bentley of Lasers, what I mean is it's hand built, like hand stitched.
Yeah.
I've been there. It's unbelievable. You welcome people to tour the facility.
Yeah.
It is truly a different experience at Sciton. And this is not a commercial for Sciton. I have no vested interest in this. I own a number of lasers and a lot of very good lasers. But as we talk about Sciton, there is a palpable difference. And when I say the Bentley of Lasers, that's what I'm talking about. You mentioned the mJOULE system. Could you elaborate a little bit for our listeners about the different wavelengths or the different approaches within that platform so they understand what that means on one footprint and so forth?
Yeah, so the mJOULE X platform, we've got two platforms. There's a mJOULE X platform, and then we recently rolled out the mJOULE platform. The mJOULE just does two things, but the mJOULE X can have 5 different lasers inside of it, plus it can have a fiber optic port, so you can do things like our Allura product. There's things you can do with that delivery method. There's an articulating arm you can use, and we use that for our Nd:YAG and our Halo products and our erbium full field. And then you can have the BBL, our version of an IPL platform, all in one device. So it goes back to you can just do a lot of things with one box. And I don't know if there's any devices out there that could have 4 lasers and a light source all in one. I think that's pretty darn unique. And it's something we've been doing from day one. When we started in 96, so we started with just erbium. And then the concept has always been, don't sell everybody 10 boxes. Have one box and just keep everything you come out with. How do we figure out how to put it in one bigger box? So you can say, I want that box and I want that mJOULE X just to do BBL. You could say, I just wanted to do full field erbium resurfacing. I just wanted to do fractional erbium resurfacing. I just wanted to do Halo. Or you could say, I want to do all of it. So it's really, and the other benefit is if you say, I want this now, you can get something else later.
Well, let's make that a little more clear. I want to make that clear. So go through that again a little slower so the consumer understands it. So they have one box and they have all these wavelengths. And if you want to strap on additional wavelengths after you purchase the first few wavelengths, you may, right?
At any point. You can take any new product we roll out and you can put it on the mJOULE X platform. So if you bought something 5 years ago, if you bought Halo 5 years ago and now you said all of a sudden I want BBL, or now I want to do fractional, erbium, or hey, I want to do Allura, or whatever new product we come out. The concept is how do we put that box in another one so a doctor isn't always, or a provider isn't always having to go buy a new expensive box. Even if you spend a little more up front, you're spending 50, 60, 70,000 for a module every year when something comes out versus spending a ton of money on a whole other box. So, you hear all the stories of, people have closets and there's a ton of lasers sitting in there. Our concept is you're going to have the mJOULE X forever, because even if the product is 10 years old and you're not using that product and we've come out with something better, you're putting it back on that box. So we just view it as it's a long-term investment, and it's something you're going to have for 10, 20 years. It's not something that you're going to have for 2 or 3 years and then you're replacing a laser. You're going to have that mJOULE X platform for a long time.
Okay, I'm going to take one of the wavelengths. Everyone on this podcast is probably familiar with intense pulse light or photofacial. And you have a proprietary IPL called BBL, which I'd like you to elaborate on a little bit more. Yeah. And then I'd like you to launch into the new BBL and explain to us how it's different than the old BBL. But let's start by what distinguishes your BBL from an average IPL?
Yeah. Good question. So IPL was the first one to come out. IPL came out, and then our engineering team really believed they could make it better. And Sciton's somewhat known for that. We're not always the first one to come out with a product. Maybe you could say we're fast followers, but we'll take a product and go, we think we can make that better. We have a different way of doing it and making it better. And our broadband light, or BBL, is a perfect example of that. One, it's cooling. The handpiece will really last a long time. There is nothing built into the handpiece that says, you can get X number of shots, meaning so you're going to be able to do a lot of treatments, and it's going to go until the bulbs go out. But we designed it to where it lasts a long time. You have controlled cooling, so which is obviously really important when you're doing energy treatment like that. You really need to cool the skin. So if you want more energy, you have flexibility on how much cooling you want. But it's got 2 flash lamps inside of it, and it's got the enhanced cooling inside of it, so it lasts a long time. I mean, it's not a handpiece you're going to replace on a regular basis. So you can do a ton of treatments, use it for a long time. At some point, you may have to replace it, but it's not, in a sense, a consumable handpiece that all of a sudden every 2 years or every 500 treatments have to be replaced. So,
okay, and that's the traditional BBL that you came up with.
That's the traditional BBL.
Okay.
Now Hero, which is the one we just rolled out, is real. This is, I would argue, and Patrick Bitter, who we all know, Dr. Patrick Bitter Jr., was really him and his dad really are the ones that really founded or really created the whole IPL.
Right.
And we've been working with him for a long time. So he and our engineering team really had a better way of doing it. And he would argue this is the biggest revolution in pulse light in 20 years. I mean, it's really a big deal in the sense that it's everything BBL was, but now it's in motion. So it's called BBL HERO, and HERO stands for High Energy Rapid Output. So it's really putting a lot more energy, but actually in a safer way. So the 2 best things, or the 2 features I would say, is it's a safer and much faster. So it's safety and speed. You could do a whole chest or a whole back in, I heard somebody say it, 1/20th of the time. It is, I mean, you can do a chest in 3 minutes. But you're moving the whole time. So you're not going to have striping. Think about IPL today. The thing people struggle with is on the face, they love it. But when you get off of the face, they're worried about stamping. They're worried about patterns. They're worried about burning people. And it's harder to treat the body. It's harder to treat the chest and the arms and the back. So people just usually avoid it and they'll go to some laser. But the BBL device is perfect for it. So the whole time we've been trying to figure out, well, we know it's great, but people are scared to do it. So how do we come up with a better way of doing it? And our team and Dr. Bitter have been working on it for years, really 3 years in the making of, how can we make this better? And how can we make basically the handpiece move? So essentially what you're doing is you're moving the handpiece the whole time. You're putting more energy in the skin, but you're doing it safer. One, because the handpiece, we added more cooling to it, so it can keep up with you moving it. But you're doing it at lower pulses. You're not putting a lot of energy in at one time. You're moving it back and forth. And we're getting crazy good results. And we've been getting them, as a matter of fact, Dr. Bitter and Dr. Posner, who have been yelling at us, so why aren't we rolling this out? Why haven't you rolled this product out? Why haven't you rolled this product out? And finally we said, now's the time to do it. So we had picked to roll it out in March. And then with everything that happened, we obviously, kind of reassessed and said, we're just going to wait for the right time to roll it out. And just about a month ago, we started our big, push rolling out the product. And it's been a hit. We June was the best June in our company history. And it's I think there was the doctors and providers wanted to get back and get things going again. But I got to say, it was Hero that really made it so successful. It was 90% better year over year in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, that's kind of crazy, but it's really the BBL Hero launch that deserves all the credit.
When you put the halo on an existing customer's JOULE, do you replace the BBL, or do they keep their BBL?
Usually, well, if you wanted Hero, you would replace it because there are some internal components that are different, and the handpiece is different because the handpiece has to have more additional cooling to keep up, so the handpiece is different. But that's a perfect example of someone who owns BBL now is upgrading for a fraction of the price of buying a brand new one. So anybody who has BBL now, on a JOULE platform, on a BBLS, we can't do that, which is one of our older, smaller platforms. But the platform you have, you could certainly add BBL Hero to it.
Well, that's clearly an advantage to your doctor, consumer, the provider, the ability to, if you will, swap out the older version and put on the newer version without buying an entirely different box.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited. I don't have the Hero yet, but I look forward to taking delivery of it. I love the BBLs. And we'll get back to how much I love them and why, because I'm a personal consumer.
Yeah. You will have it soon.
Okay, great. Now, moving on, though, I wanted you to spend a few minutes about Halo. Okay. It's a very unique laser. People think, all lasers are the same, or it's just an erbium laser, and we both know there's some very big differences and uniqueness about Halo. Yep. So why don't you share that with us? Yeah,
Halo is, I would say, another example of, we've had fractional erbium, and fractional CO2 has been out there for a long time. I mean, there was nothing new there, but where Halo is radically different was we were able to take 2 lasers, put them into one handpiece essentially and deliver a non-ablative and ablative at the same time. So you've got a 1470 wavelength that's non-ablative, and you have a 2940 that's ablative, and you can essentially dial it in however you want. If you want a more aggressive treatment that has more erbium and has more downtime, and the patient's okay with downtime, which I know is you prefer the more downtime stuff, and the dermatologist would prefer more of the non-ablative. They want something where someone's not going to have a lot of downtime or any bleeding or any pinpoint bleeding. So really, it gives the provider a ton of control, and it's the patient to decide, how much downtime do I want, what kind of a result do I want, and then you're dialing in specific settings depending on the condition that you're treating. But ultimately, I don't think anybody else. There's certainly companies that have one laser and you'll do a pass with one laser and then you come back and do another pass with another laser. But I'm not sure if I'm aware of anybody who's been able to put it in one device and in one handpiece, and you're rolling it on the skin and it's firing two lasers, back to back. I mean, they're pulsing right after each other, and it's pretty impressive. And then we've had it since, I think we rolled it out in 2015, and I still don't think there's anything like it out there.
So just to reiterate, so we have an ablative and a non-ablative in two different wavelengths, and it's at the same time one handpiece. And so it truly delivers remarkable results. I will confess, before he asked me, I've had 2 or 3 of them, maybe 4 even, halos over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, as well as BBLs at the same time. But the halo is truly a unique laser that allows us to both treat superficially and deep with an ablative and a non-ablative format in 2 different wavelengths, as I mentioned. So and I'm not aware of any other company that has that. Yeah. I know we could roll 2 different lasers in and try to make that happen. Right. But it is unique for sure. I must ask, since I sort of pulled up my skirt a little bit and confessed, have you ever had any of your lasers?
Absolutely.
Are you a consumer?
Yeah. I mean, one, we're lucky because we have a lab, we have a clinic at our office in Palo Alto, so I can, when they need a demo patient, I'm always volunteering. And
you're the guinea pig?
But I'm one of the guinea pigs. Now, I don't go as crazy as our engineering team, where they will get pretty crazy on doing treatments. I haven't signed up for any of those, but once we know it's going to be a product, I definitely start getting treatments. But Halo, I've certainly had many times. BBL is one you really do all the time, and yourself and all of our KOLs would tell you, if you're not doing that all the time, you're missing out. Yeah. But I tell you, I think my favorite is one that we haven't even talked about, which is Moxie, which is our new 1927. It's another non-ablative, but I've had that one 6 times.
You have?
Did you really? Because you walk in and there's literally I can go in. I can be in between conferences or meetings, between conference calls and meetings, and I can have a treatment in 15 minutes and walk back in, and you can tell my face is red, but I'm not on fire or anything, and I can I can jump on a plane and do my normal travel routine. I'll even admit, on a dialed down Halo, I don't know that I'd go do that frequently. I wouldn't, in the middle of a meeting, walk out, go have a treatment, and then walk right back in.
Well, let's take a second on that 1927, okay? There are other companies that have a 1927, and they're very successful. Yep. So tell me how your 1927 nanometer wavelength, that's what we're talking about here, for those of you who aren't in the laser business per se, this 1927 nanometer wavelength, how is yours any different than the other laser companies? Or is it?
Good question. I mean, I think a laser is a laser in a lot of ways. I mean, it's still a 1927. Our thought when we came out with it was, we needed something that wasn't quite as aggressive as Halo. So you were to have the physicians like yourself who were going to want a Halo and want more control, but you're also going to have providers who just want something that's simple, that's 2 or 3 settings, and there's not a whole, you don't go look at the screen and have to make a lot of decisions. And 1927 was really our product that we thought, well, we know that works. We've had it on the bench for a long time, but if you had 1927 and BBL together, I mean, that's a pretty amazing result. So why don't we go make a box that just has those 2 things on it? And if you just say that's all you want, that's where the mJOULE, the newer, smaller platform, you can just say, I want those 2 things. Or again, you get it on the bigger JOULE X platform. But the concept was really, it's a no downtime or almost no downtime, kind of a rejuvenation type of treatment. But you can combine it with BBL, which is, has been a home run. And with BBL HERO and then doing a 1927, you're in and out of there pretty quick, and it's all on one device, which is,
what does the 1927 add to the patient experience? If you're saying it's just a little redness, and I agree with you, and no downtime, a lot of people believe, no pain, no gain type of thing. So tell us what the 1927 looks like in terms of the clinical improvement of the quality of someone's skin.
Yeah, it's not gonna have, obviously it's not gonna be anywhere near a fractional erbium. It's not going to do the same thing a halo is going to do. But if you want some level of a glow or rejuvenation, it's going to give you some of that without having all of the ability you have with halo. So if someone wants some texture improvement, if they want, more of a glow and a healthier looking skin, it's certainly going to help with that. Now, if someone comes in and says it's fine lines and wrinkles and it's more, you really need more corrective treatment, well, then you're going to go to it. You need a halo. So this is really looking for the person who is almost, you'd call it prejuvenation. It's someone who wants to get in the routine of doing treatments before, but they don't want any downtime. They do a little bit of redness for a day is okay, and then they're back to their normal routine. I'd almost say it's like a gateway to get into lasers. I think it's perfect for something like that because some people will stay away from full field. They see those and it scares them. They're still even scared of, fractional erbium. Mm-hmm. They kind of are okay with halo, and then you've got something like a 1927 that they're going to walk out. They're going to have a little bit of heat, but they're not going to walk out uncomfortable. They're going to walk out going, man, I'd like to do that again. And then they come back and they go, I want these fine lines and wrinkles improved. And then you're like, well, halo's really the one. At some point they move to halo, and then at some point they maybe go to full field but it's definitely prejuvenation. It's really the concept of get regular treatments, a combination of that and BBL on a regular basis is really good for your skin.
So this could be the gateway laser for the millennials, it sounds like you're saying.
Yes.
That's what I hear.
That's a better way of saying it, much quicker.
Yeah, well, we've certainly seen that, and we've had this prejuvenation concept is changed everything in terms of our approach, and the average age of a person having a laser, even aesthetic medical treatment, has certainly gone down. Let's talk about the future. If you can share with us, what's Sciton looking at in the future? What do you see the future for Sciton or for the aesthetics business?
Yeah, well, we're always looking at stuff. Our guys, the R&D guys and the engineering team is always they're always talking to obviously you and other people and trying to come up with ideas. There's certainly blue ocean stuff that is completely different that we're always looking at. We're aesthetics, healthy skin, and we say Sciton owns skin, or that'll be a big piece of things we're always looking at. How do you make a better treatment or a better treatment for the patient, but also how do you make it better for the provider? There's a big piece of that too. As I've always said, I think one thing Zeltiq did really well was it was such an easy provider experience that the provider loved it. The provider bragged about it. The provider was selling it. Laser treatments are a little bit more work. Is there a way, where do you start seeing robotics involved? Where do you get to where things are more automated and you need the provider, but the provider's not doing all the work? I think there's a lot of existing stuff that Sciton is looking at going, we can still make that a ton better. There's a lot of stuff we can certainly make better. And then there's certainly the blue ocean stuff that's harder to get into that, we can't necessarily talk about that. And there's 2 or 3 big opportunities we see in the next, 2, 3, 4 years that would be, really big opportunities for us that are markets that nobody's in. And we're certainly working on those too.
So I asked you about the aesthetics industry briefly. So that's Sciton. Tell me, you've been in this business for how long? Again, when did you start with Sciton?
2011.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you see the future? What does the aesthetics business look like to you? So non-surgical.
Yeah. That's a good question. Everybody has it seems like most of the companies have moved to like an RF world. That has become the thing. If you really, and we don't have any RF, based products. Mm-hmm. So I think you're going to see more where I think laser companies are trying to get their costs down, candidly. They're trying to come up with a way to reduce because lasers aren't cheap to make, and it's not cheap for us to make them in the heart of Silicon Valley, and we get it. We've just chosen that's who we're going to be. We're not going to go build somewhere else. We're not going to go build someone else's laser. But I ultimately, I think you're seeing, notice every 5 years, there's something big that comes out, but it's not very often. It's usually a copy of something else. And candidly, I've always struggled in our industry. There's some good ones. You and I could go through a list of good products out there. Right. But for every one good one, there's 10 that really don't work or are crappy. And you go, how did they get, Mm-hmm. So in being run by a physicist and, and our, science team, they're always thinking about, well, we could go do that, but do we want to do that? So I don't know. That's a really good question. I sit back and I wonder all the time, well, what's the next big thing? And we think we know what they are, and we're working on some of them. But a lot of the things I keep hearing aren't that flashy right now.
Well, I've found, and I've been in the laser business, I did my first pulse dye in 1983, so I've been involved in lasers for many, many years. I've owned over 100 of them. At one point, we counted 38 in our center. But some of the companies are driven by marketing, and they're not by science. The one thing I've noticed about Sciton and why I like the company so much is it's driven by science and results, and not by marketing. In fact, I would say maybe years ago when we got together back in San Francisco, I remember giving Hobart grief about it. It's like the best little laser company that no one had ever heard of. Do you remember that?
I do.
We were trying, and
Hobart still talks about that. He still doesn't like that because he doesn't want to be that. I mean,
and there's a way around that, certainly, and we've been pushing him a little bit, and I know you have, and so forth, and certainly.
I mean, a lot of the big
hopefully
changes.
Today we're getting the word out a little bit, and I don't have any vested interest. I don't own any stock. I have absolutely no personal gain if Sciton does well. I happen to believe in the laser company, and there's some other good laser companies.
I agree.
So I'm not suggesting that's the only one. I just want to go through my notes here. In terms of why I'm doing that, COVID, because it's appropriate now. Is Sciton doing anything special in this COVID reality? Anything we should know about?
Seems like everything now is special.
Well, I know. That's why I ask you. Are your engineers coming to work? Are they working at home? It's hard to build a laser in your garage, although Hobart did it originally.
That is where it started. And it's funny you bring that up because we have started building labs, and we've moved labs back to the engineers' houses. So they still do come in, but we try not to have anybody at the same place at the same time. So our engineering group, there'll be an eighth of them there, and then they're all kind of rotating around and moving stuff around, and we Zoom all day long. We're having Zoom meetings. Like I mentioned, Hobart hasn't left his house in 6 months. But ultimately, we didn't have too many changes. We really thought about this, and one advantage we had coming into this is we were in a good cash position, so we didn't have to do any layoffs. We didn't furlough anybody.
That's amazing.
I mean, we really stuck to what our values were and said, okay, man, this is nobody can build a strategy that was based on this. Nobody was planning on this. But we were in a good position to where we said, okay, we need to see what's going to happen. But we said we need to bet on our people. One, we knew we had new stuff coming out, and we thought furloughing and laying people off, that's not going to help us. So we need to figure out how do we keep everybody. And, we did some salary reductions. We had, it was like 50% of our people voluntarily gave up 20%. Others, we had some mandatory reductions, but, just as of 30 days ago, we gave everybody their money back. We thought, man,
even back wages.
We started to go to the back wages, but we thought, you know what, let's at least give everybody their money back. I mean, things are really turning around faster than we expected.
Right.
And we thought, we need to give everybody their money back. So we gave their salaries back, and we're pretty much back to normal. I mean, in a sense that we can run all in the office all at the same time, but from a performance standpoint, and the company actually did really well. And we track a lot of that based on, we have something called Sciton IQ, which is where we can track that's really to track the health of a system. But it also tells us how many treatments are people doing. And we always believed that once physicians' treatment volume picked back up, well, the orders are going to pick back up and people will start buying more capital. And that recovered. That was definitely a V-shape. We were surprised at how fast it recovered. As a matter of fact, for 5 consecutive weeks now, we have been above 2019. So it's seasonal. We know this time of year it's obviously slower, so it's not February numbers. But if you take the average treatments per system from last year, compare it to this year, for 5 consecutive weeks, our providers are doing more treatments now. So
wow. So you were sitting on cash. You had a record June or July. Coming out. You set everybody back a little bit. Now you laid off nobody, now you've replenished their rev. They're making the same income they were before the COVID. Yep. That's really something. What a great example of a company, a corporate philosophy, and that comes from you, the CEO, and of course your board. Yeah. But you're to be complimented. Congratulations. That's fabulous.
That. I appreciate that.
So we've heard about the company, the lasers. We could go on forever about them, but I want to get to know you a little bit better. Tell us about your philosophy and, more importantly, your leadership style.
Yeah, I think most people would probably say Aaron is one heck of an optimist. I think I am really built on. I think I'm cautious. I think there's a little bit of, maybe the Andy Grove, only the paranoid survive. I do think I'm thinking that, but I think generally I look for positive. I'm not the person who, gets angry and throws things. I'm usually the one thinking there's a way we're going to get through this. Even when we were, when this all happened in March, we had our annual meeting and everybody's together, and the next week everything's shutting down. I mean, we really thought, wow, what's going to happen here? But the whole time I struggle to think from a negative perspective. So most people would say, man, that he's a big dreamer. I mean, he thinks big, And, the team ultimately we all execute on the dream, but I'm usually thinking, from an optimistic, I struggle being a pessimist. Candidly, I struggle being around a bunch of pessimists. And in the world we're in today, it's hard, because, you read the news and you see things, and that's kind of the world we're in right now. It all seems to be negative. But
I knew there was a great reason. A good reason and a great reason where we're great friends. We are so much alike as the glass is always full for you, right? You're an optimist,
absolutely.
So am I.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, are there any other things you'd like to share with us, or any advice for your listeners, your buyers? Anything in closing you'd like to share?
I guess I would just say, I guess we could go a million different ways with that.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think I think our industry in general, I think it was certainly a roadblock for the industry in general. But I ultimately think the industry is going to get stronger because of this. I think Sciton will get stronger, other companies will get stronger. I think physicians they're going to recover, and I think ultimately we're all going to be in a better place. We've all learned a ton from this too. But I'm just excited. I mean, like you mentioned, and like I've been talking about, we had a great quarter, and times are really good right now.
Terrific. So, well, congratulations. You guys have done a great job. Your philosophy is terrific. Your products are terrific. The team is terrific. It's been a pleasure working with you the whole time, and I want to thank you for flying in here to Manhattan Beach and being a part of the Technology of Beauty podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We're going to have to do this more often. I like this. I like the positive.
Yeah,
yes.
I appreciate it. And thank you all for watching and listening, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Technology of Beauty podcast. Take care.